Hey there, boys and girls. It's Ralph Garman, and you're listening to Talking Codswallop. Good choice.
Hello, everybody. This is Ming Chen from AMC's Comic Book Man. You might know me from the Tell 'em Steve Dave podcast and the I Sell Comics podcast. Listen, I love podcasting. I love talking, but what I really love doing is talking Codswallop.
Hey, I'm Alicia Witt.
I'm Daniel Portman from Game of Thrones. I play Podrick Payne.
I'm Ellipses, and you're listening to the Talking... Okay, I'm Mark Bernard, and you're listening to the Talking Codswallop podcast.
Hey man, it's Kevin Smith, Silent Bob, whose voice you were never used to hearing in the 90s until I started opening it up, man. And that's because I'm a podcaster and you're listening to a podcast, Talking Codswallop, right here, man.
Hello and welcome to this week's Talking Codswallop. And on this week's episode, I have a very cool, very interesting guest to have on, who I interestingly, well, I'll tell you what, rather than describe how I got to know this gentleman, I'm going to bring into the conversation, but I have Mr. Leonard Pigg on, who I have been wanting to talk to for a very long time, and I have been lucky enough to put together now. So I was going to say good evening, but for you, you're in a totally different time zone, Leonard. So, is it good afternoon for you?
It is good afternoon, yes, thank you.
And is it Lenny or Leonard?
You can call me Lenny.
Okay, no problem. We can go with Lenny. I always want to get it right. So, Lenny, first thing is thank you for coming on to the podcast, onto the show. And tell us a bit about yourself. Where does the Lenny Pigg story start?
Oh, I'm from Indiana, the city of Kokomo, and I have been doing acting, writing, stand-up comedy, some independent film, and I've written a couple of comic books. That's pretty much me in a nutshell. And in between there, it's like I went to college and got to meet some cool people and live in a different city and all that.
You are what we call like one of these multi-talented threat people, because you've done that many different things. Most people only stay to one lane, but you have absolutely smashed it and gone into all these other different things. And I'm not just saying this to massage like your ego, but I watched the films links you'd sent me. Brilliant. I absolutely love them. And what really amused me is the fact that I mentioned you to somebody I work with who knows nothing about my podcast or what I do, but as soon as I mentioned you, they went, I know who that guy is. And
yeah, we're getting around, I guess.
So to explain how we initially got in contact with each other, we were on, you were on a podcast called Reels and Heels, which I've been on previously, but unfortunately I was unwell, unable to go on it that evening. But Lenny is such a nice guy that he actually reached out and said, if you ever want to speak to me or talk to me or do anything like that, we can look at doing that. So this shows what a lovely guy this is. So tell us about you. I'm always interested to know for people I talk to. Tell me a bit about when you were growing up in your life and how you got where you are, if you would, please.
I was raised an only child, and I had a couple of half siblings, but I wasn't always very close with them. I didn't see them often, but man, it felt like the long, lone road, you know what I'm saying? And interestingly enough, I've, like being a kid and growing up and trying to figure yourself out, you end up looking to other sources to entertain yourself, For me, it was like reading comic books. Of course, TV. Everybody was real big into TV, but I liked comic books. I liked the Choose Your Own Adventure books. I used to watch wrestling when I was a kid. I was into so many things, and it's funny how, like, a lot of those have kind of fallen away, but the comic books have remained. That's something that's always going to be a part of who and what I do. But I guess I'm going on a little bit of a tangent, I suppose, but this is the origin story.
take whatever route you want. And I myself am an only child, so I'm interested to see how we can compare notes.
Well, I mean, because being an only child, I mean, you had to kind of figure out, if you didn't want to have like friends in the neighborhood, or if you weren't well adjusted enough to have many, it's like, there you are with your action figures on the porch, or in the backyard, or you're going to another neighborhood for some kind of adventure. But yeah, it's I did a lot of scraping and scrapping here and there, and didn't want to, but same token, I didn't want to get slapped around either.
I can relate to that to a degree.
I had a conversation the other day with a gentleman, and one of the things that came up was I compared parallel parking to bar fighting.
I'm intrigued. Go on.
I can do both, but it is an absolute last resort. I'm just like, if there's no other choice, then I guess we'll do this.
I get it with the bar fighting, but I think as a comment on parallel parking, I love that.
Yeah. They're both just very difficult, navigating this kind of scenery. That kind of scenery is just haphazard at best, man.
But sometimes there are needs must.
Yeah.
So, what you were talking about, you mentioned earlier on your education. So, what's your education background been, and did it help you get into the work you're doing now?
Yeah, it's sort of a roundabout way, but I've got a BA in communications from Marion College, which actually now it's Marion University out of Indianapolis, Indiana. And my BA was communication, minor in Spanish. With communication, it's like I was focusing on television and radio and that sort of thing, because before I was actually in college, I had worked in radio during the summers. And so I was on air talent doing that. And of course, in between, I'm doing theatrical productions. I was in a readers theater group. I did some improv classes here and there. So yeah, it all kind of tied together. It just at first didn't really seem that way because for a good while, like fresh out of college, it's like the only jobs you could find were like telemarketing or sales jobs. And it's just like, it's not really what I want to do, but hey, it's decent money. Why not? It'll work till you get where you want to get and do what you want to do. I mean, that's what us creatives have to do, really.
And that's the interesting thing. I mean, to me, you've got the kind of voice that works perfectly for doing that kind of thing, which the thing that I also remember when I first heard you on the Reels and Heels, I thought, that man's got a really cool voice. And that's what kind of stuck in my memory quite a lot, along with the things you talk about what you did. So, interestingly, where we have a similar thing that you mentioned is the fact that you're saying they're coming back to comics. Because I remember as a kid, I liked reading comics as a child, and then as I got older, I probably for a period wasn't so much into them, and then you do find yourself coming back into them. So the question I would like to ask is, who do you prefer, Batman or Superman, and why?
Oh, man.
Everyone says, whenever I ask them, they always have the same thing, oh, man, that's a...
I mean, they're both great characters. It's like I've always said that if Superman got elected president, there'd be people getting mad going, well, Batman doesn't handle money better. That's just sort of like this. But honestly, I'd say Superman. He had the humble beginnings. Mm-hmm. Despite all the powers, like you strip down to the core of that character, you have a guy, from the Midwest. He had that upbringing. He had, the good parents. If he had landed in a crappy neighborhood, you'd have a supervillain on your hands. But Superman, I think, kind of represents the best in all of us.
Yeah, I once, when I was telling somebody about Superman, described him this way. I said, he's who we would want to be, personality-wise, with all the best things he does and the positive things. He's who, as from an emotional standpoint and doing the right thing, he's the person you would want to be. The worrying thing is, you probably, if it would look at the reality of human beings, is we'd all turn into evil, horrible supervillains.
Right.
But I cling to the fact that I suspect if we did have Superman's powers, I'm always worried that if I had Superman's powers, I'd go bad. I'd go rogue and start using it to my advantage. But hey, we've got to cling to the fact it wouldn't happen. So, with regard to the kind of work you went into, and looking at the film sort of work you went into, can you tell us a bit more about how that came about? And because obviously, after you've done the university, how did you move into that kind of world?
Well, at the time, like I said, I'm still doing theater here and there. I was in a sketch comedy group of Nietzsche's Trailer Park, and I got involved with them about a year or two after college. And a lot of them were actors that were from different. There were a couple from some improv groups, and a couple from other theatrical groups in town that just trying to find their own way. And so we all kind of came together, and it was cool. And we did a great production. And it was right around 9/11, I remember, because the time it wasn't our opening night, but I think it was our second night, and that had happened during the day. But it was thinking that, oh my God, I don't know if the crowd's going to laugh. And you know what, they did, because they needed that catharsis, because we were bombarded that day, and it just really messed everybody's heads up, you know. But I noticed the arts. It's like I was doing the poetry slam scene for a while, and that kind of blended into some of the acting, and that kind of blended into this, that, and the other. And so, living in Indianapolis, I'd hear about auditions and things, so I'd go check them out, whether it was for film, theater, whatever. And so, it was kind of funny when I went to the audition for Mental Scars. It was at a hotel that I'd seen where they used to do conventions and stuff at, like the small scale ones. I'm like, oh, I know where this place is. Cool. Okay. I'm familiar. And then go in, and I ended up sitting in the lobby, you know, waiting my turn and everything. And there's this well-dressed guy sitting across from me. He was a light complected black guy, shaved head, the pencil-thin mustache, stylish suit, you know. I mean, this guy looked like a character. And I think his name was Ivan Rogers, and he was a actor, and I guess he'd started directing a lot of films too. He was from Indianapolis. I didn't know who the guy was at the time. I didn't recognize him. But I sat there in the lobby talking to him. We talked about movies and different things, and then later on, of course, after the fact, I found out that's the director, and then I go in, I give an audition, and it's like I end up being just a construction worker. But I met other actors and that, and it was a fun time. Like if you look up the trailer for Mental Scars, there's a point where you see me just running for my life. Like you just see me just hot-footing it through a junkyard, and at the time I had on blue jeans and a yellow shirt. Because I told a friend of mine, I said I was channeling my inner Luke Cage because I was walking around carrying scrap around. But
see, my mind went as soon as you said that's what my mind went to on the color scheme. I was like, yeah, I was thinking, why did that seem familiar? And then you explained why. I always want to know, because like people who go into the entertainment industry for that kind of work, and I spoke to actors about this, but I want to see what your kind of take on it is. It's not what you would consider a safe option. So when you go into it, what kind of take do you get from friends and family if you go, this is the plan? Because for some people who are, if you say you come from an acting family, and I've spoken to people who are actors who come from an acting family, they're like, well, my family knows nothing else. But did you ever get the, the kind of like, are you sure?
Everybody's pretty encouraging. I didn't really have any naysayers in my family. So I lucked out in that respect. That they've seen, it's like, you know, it just kept evolving, you know, like, oh, you know, you're doing stage plays, and then like, hey, I'm in this, and I've been in a film. Really? Yeah, we come premiere. It's going to be at IUPUI, whatever. Let's go check it out. All right. And then, oh my God, yeah, there you are on this screen. Like, wow, okay. It's very surreal. I mean, I'm not like rich and famous at this point. But it is kind of odd. Sometimes I get recognized here and there. Like I said, I don't know what project they can recognize me from. The most recent one I did, Canary Currency, which is a crime story that's on Amazon Prime and TV. there was a guy who came up to me in this store, and he was just like, "Oh man, you're evil." I'm like, "What are you talking about?" Like, I just thought he was just some random guy coming up. I'm like, what, he's like condemning me or something, you know? Heathen. Like, no, so what are you talking about? He goes, on that show, man, you were laughing, man. It was like the Joker.
Well, that is what my friend knew you from.
Oh, from the Canary
That's the one.
Wow.
That's the one.
Yeah.
That is the one. But as I just couldn't get over the fact, I'm like, I work with you. You know very little about my podcast and what I do, but you know some, and this is no disrespect against you at all. I'm like, you know the guy I've just mentioned that I'm going to be talking to, but you know, like, naff all about my
Right.
But hey, obviously you are the better draw than I am. So most definitely you are the better draw, sir.
Too kind.
So when you actually get into like the working in film and TV, what is it? Because you just sort of like hit upon it slightly. When you see yourself for the first time on, you know, the big screen, the small screen, whatever, what's it like? What's the hit like?
You know, like everybody that knows you is probably going, "Oh wow, that's so and so on TV. Great to see him." Blah blah blah. You know. Meanwhile, you're looking at yourself. You're like, "Oh, I should have held my gut in there." Oh, like, you know, I'm just over analyzing it sometimes, going, I don't remember that take. Like, that wasn't a good take. Oh, that works. Or, oh man, my collar was up, and it was like, why didn't somebody tell me? I'm like picking it apart. I'm like the continuity killer over there. I'm like, no. You know, and it's funny, when we were doing Canary, that's kind of what happened. I had to try to keep a similar look, and so I didn't cut my hair for a few months, and it was driving.
You say you had longer hair, didn't you? Yeah.
Like if you see me in the first episode of that series, my hair, like the scene where I'm laughing, my hair's all flared out, and I'm just like, you know, cackling, and that was something that was kind of done on the fly. I won't spoil the entire series, but I will just say there's one scene where this guy was sent to do a job by his boss. He screwed up the hit. His brother gets killed in the process. So this guy comes back to this particular boss, and he's like, hey, man, we need to get these guys. And he's like, so you didn't take out who I told you to? And he's like, no, but if we get some more people, we do. And the guy just and proceeds to just give him a beating. And my character's there. And in the scene, I remember, like, because the differentiation in size between the two actors, I mean, the boss character, very physically imposing, Kane Marco's his name. He's a rapper here in the States. And, I mean, the dude bodybuilt, so he's just ripped. And there's this scene, you see him throw that arm, and a guy hits the ground. Now, my character had brought this dude in. I was kind of like a gatekeeper, if you will. And for whatever reason, I was sitting there thinking, I'm like, I think this is I think the guy would get a kick out of it. Like that character, Slug, is who I play in that series. Mm-hmm. And so I said, is that cool? And I said, yeah, we'll try it in this take. Okay. And then I just start cackling. So like the whole time, like as you're watching the scene play out, you see this guy, he's getting the stuffing kicked out of him. I mean, he's getting a serious beating. And the entire time I'm in the background just cackling like a maniac. You know, I'm standing at the pool table watching this take place. So when they cut away to me, I'm just like, you know, full on madman mode.
Which I just thought was brilliant. Sorry, it just cracks me up. So I just thought it was brilliant.
Oh, thank you.
So when it comes to, I mean, this might sound like a bit of a strange question, but when it comes to choosing the sort of things you're going to be working on, how do you go about doing that? Is it just a thing of, well, this looks interesting, I'll do it? Or do you have a specific sort of type of role you want to go to or go for? Or do you do it from, say, and this sounds like a moral perspective ever?
Most of what I've done as far as picking something, like, is it something that, as far as the description of that specific character, is something that I could kind of embody? I'm like, I think I could do that. Yeah. You know, or especially if they say maybe they're looking for a certain type. I'm like, okay. When I was in college, my roommate and I would go to auditions and things. And at one point, this this professor, he told a couple of students, but not all the students, about a commercial for it was something they said they wanted the all-American look. That was the phrase he used. He want somebody with the all-American look. So he didn't tell me or my roommate, or he had a conversation with my roommate about it, and he was like, "Well, why didn't you tell us? We act too." And he goes, "Well, you guys are more of the dark European types," which I thought was an odd thing to say, but I guess he didn't think that my roommate or I represented Americana. I'm like, that's fine. That's whatever. Now, there have been times I've gone in, and what I'll try to do is I'll look at what's going on with a specific character and just kind of come up with something quick for them, give them some kind of energy, some kind of persona, so at least they can see what I'm capable of. And then I'll change my voice up. There have been times where it's like I do readings in different voices, and people would look at me strangely. I'm like, I can keep doing more voices if you want.
Mm-hmm.
But ultimately, I've noticed the horror films have been pretty good to me, and I've been in a few of those.
Yeah.
And the crime dramas, the crime-based stuff, I think really, there's something very appealing about it. I think everybody likes to see a gangster or a mobster or whatever. It's just such a big thing in cinema. And so I've done it a few times. I've played like bodyguards and, tough guys and whatnot. And that's been fun too. I always consider myself a non-traditional male lead, so I always feel like I've got enough presence about me. I can call attention to myself, but at the same token, it's not necessarily a traditional, the square-jawed hero walking in the room. It's me, It's like a different energy, but a different kind of strength, if you will.
And which of you preferred playing? Because now people always say that the villain or someone who's of that sort is a more interesting character. Because, for example, I always found the villain more interesting, but I don't know if you watched it, but Cobra Kai is on at the moment.
Yeah, I've watched it.
And when the bad guys are in there, I'm like, these are far more interesting than the good guys. There's a far more fleshed out character. And I don't know if you've seen them all. See, I don't want to spoil it for people, but on the most recent series, there's a big returning character. And I'm like, that guy's far more interesting than anybody else who's good on it.
He really is. And I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah.
He's actually, I think, he's a great actor.
Yes. Yeah.
Thomas Ian Griffith.
Yeah.
Man, it was funny, like that scene. I think he started just playing piano, and the next thing you know, he's talking about his drug habit back in the day and how he was a maniac, and then he became this better man, and we kind of believed him.
Actually, you know what? Screw it. Let's spoil it. I'm going to discuss this with you for a second then.
Yeah.
So, did you ever feel that, Terry Silver was... He was okay at one point. He seemed to have sort of pulled himself together. And I genuinely I kind of wondered when you first see him in the show, did he want to, was he actually genuinely being a good guy? I kind of felt maybe he was. And he probably could have stayed that way because he saw his own flaws. He said, I was so whacked on cocaine, sort of thing.
Yeah. It made me think of the Norman Osborn effect,
Yeah.
It's like, when's he going to goblin up? You're like, he can't keep it together very long. Eventually, he's just going to, you just got to find, somebody's going to say something or mention something, and then.
Yeah, totally.
And so.
We're ruining it for people, but yeah, spoiler alert.
Yeah, a little bit.
Spoiler alert. Salty Tab. Yeah, our listeners are called Salty Tadpoles, so I'll just say Salty Tadpoles if you've not seen it. Sorry. You're going to have to suck it up and deal with it.
Oh, my God.
But I sort of sidetracked and almost took it away from the question that I'd asked you, which is, who do you prefer playing? Good guys, bad guys, or somewhere in between?
I've had a lot of people ask me what Slug is in the series. And I said, it's your interpretation. Because he's kind of in the middle. He's in the middle of a lot of things, and he's connected to these different factions, if you will. He's given out information here. He's done some stuff here and there, but is he heroic? Not necessarily. Is he a villain? No, I wouldn't say that either. It's just he's reacting in a lot of crazy situations where for me, I just thought, I'm like, this dude's obviously, he's got issues. This character is like not well, and that needs to come across on occasion. So you would catch him sort of like his interaction with people is a little bit askew.
Mm-hmm.
But then, to catch him in a moment where he's like, he's seeing something going on, like, this guy getting his butt kicked, and he just starts cackling. It's just like he couldn't keep it in. It's like that little sinister schoolgirl energy was just percolating in him. He couldn't. He sees this and he just has to explode. He can't keep it to himself. He can't ignore and pretend that it doesn't exist. But yeah, like the ambivalent characters, man, you get to have so much fun because, it's almost like the wrestling thing. You get some of these guys that turn heel.
Mm-hmm.
People still love them. They just, people want to see a redemption arc. They want to see people go bad. They want to see people break bad. I think that's something that's always been a fascination with folks, the breaking point. Because a lot of times you look at crimes and the majority of these crimes, this guy just snapped one day. He's been dealing with this for years, and then today is the day,
Yeah. Unfortunately, you do see that, but you're right. Yeah, people do kind of want a redemption arc, and I'm trying to think. There was something I saw recently. I love it when I have a moment of blankness, unfortunately, but where you expected, you're watching a film or a story and you expect that. I'm always interested when there's no redemption, though, when you expect there to be a redemption for a character and there's just like nothing and they're just like evil, basically. In fact, to be fair, we discussed, it was something that I remember discussing when I actually was on Reels and Heels, when we discussed the Halloween films.
Mm-hmm.
And I was saying that with the way they've redone the reboot, with they're just continuing from the first one, we've had the Halloween and then Halloween Kills, and I'm thinking to myself, wouldn't it be interesting when they finalise it all that we don't really know why it happened, that we don't get an idea why Michael actually did it, that it's just like he's just evil?
Yeah.
Because to me that could add that, if it just literally ends however it's going to end, but there's no real explanation. It's just like this guy's pure out and out evil. That's it. There's no weird magical powers or family links or the rune stuff that's in the other things. It is just pure, unfiltered evil.
Wow. I mean, and you could just kind of don't have to go too far in depth into it. Just be like, evil exists. This is one example. I mean, it's I've noticed a lot of times you get these characters get these mythical proportions. They become so massive, and people want to know where they come from. What's the story behind this? It was like when they did the first Highlander movie, and in the second one they explained it away, like, oh, they're from another planet. And
that didn't go down very well, did it? Though.
No, because they made like an alternate cut of the film. They had like a renegade version, a Phoenix version, another where they basically said they erased the whole Planet Zeiss thing, and they just said when they show that world with this dystopian big battles and stuff, they said the future. So like basically it's like, so suddenly it's like these guys are humanity in the future getting banished back to past, forced to live as an immortal, and to go through this whole cycle because eventually they're supposed to get there, right? It's kind of weird because even that was odd too. You're like, so is all humanity immortal? What's the future really like? They tried so hard to like jumble things up, and it just looked. It's a beautiful disaster. The best way to describe it. I mean, because if you look at the elaborate stuff they did with sets, and I think they were filming it on location, like in Spain or somewhere, and it's just like, oh my god. And I mean, for a movie, for what it was, I mean, Russell Mulcahy is a good director. I've always liked his stuff. But man, that movie in particular, like that second one, it's like should have just left it a mystery.
Yeah, I agree with you. It is better when there's a bit of mystery to something. Now, speaking of things that are a jumbled mess, I've got a bit of a jumbled mess in asking this question because I probably should have asked you earlier on. But you know what? Let's mix it up and make it a bit weird and interesting. So,
Sure.
Who would you say has influenced you the most in your work?
Honestly, I did. Dwayne McDuffie, God rest his soul. He was such a great writer.
Mm-hmm.
And he used to have a website where you could go on. It was like a message board and stuff. And people go in there and chat with him. I mean, they had chat rooms and everything, and they were talking about comics because he was doing stuff. He created Damage Control for Marvel. He'd written about every character there. He'd done stuff for DC. Then he was doing the Justice League cartoon. What's New Scooby-Doo, Ben 10, Static, Shock. I mean, all these.
Yeah.
I mean, so he was just like this amazing writer. Went from comics to animation, and it would be interesting to see. Actually, the last big thing I remember him doing before he passed, he adapted Grant Morrison's All-Star Superman into an animated film.
Yeah, I've seen it, I think. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, yes, I have definitely. It's all, yeah.
But a lot of what he did, and then the fact that at the time I was an aspiring creator, I'm kind of going, man, I want to write, I want to do this, I want to do that. I could email him, and he'd respond. I'd reached out to people in the industry before, so I'm just like a fan letter, hey, I really dig your work, or this issue in particular you wrote really touched me, whatever. Someone wouldn't respond, but Dwayne was really good about communicating with his fans, or he'd say, I've got this on my website, check this link, and it'll, help you as far as with dialogue placement or, script format, developing pitches, that sort of thing. And so he provided a lot of intel, and then a lot of his work inspired me because I was a kid at the time when Marvel was starting to reboot. They came out with a new version of Deathlock, the Michael Collins version. The guy was a pacifist. They put him in a cyborg body, so he was always trying to avoid killing. So he'd talk to the computer, and they'd go back and forth, and he'd say, "No killing, because the Deathlocks, that's what they were designed to do." But I just thought it was a great series, and you had this interesting contrast between a man of peace in a body of war, and how do you reconcile it?
So you also have done work with regard to the radio, haven't you?
Right.
I can share with you, and it's nothing like the sort of stuff you've done, but the low-level stuff that I've done, as I did bits of voiceover continuity work on the radio. Excuse me, I've been responding to a message that just came through, so I've put my keyboard back down, so sorry. But yeah, I started, before I got into doing any of this sort of podcast stuff, I'd done little bits of continuity voice work for a radio station. So how did you sort of get into the radio? What was the genesis for you getting into doing that? What did you find the most challenging?
Well, they had a radio club at the high school I went to, so we would make little productions and things. And so when we weren't working on that, it was a matter of, I had a friend of mine. We would do this sort of back and forth radio show, these punkers, and we'd use really crappy accents and just goofing around, But in the midst of doing all that, I'm learning how to, put together, as far as I DJ'd a couple of parties and things and dances. So I thought, okay, cool. I was just sort of on that pathway, and then I just went and applied, and because I thought, what's the worst thing they're going to say? No. Okay, cool. I mean, and a lot of times you almost have to break it down to those basis components. Well, if they say no, they say no. I'll try somewhere else. But I was fortunate and got my foot in the door in the right place, right time, because it was around the year the FCC changed the regulations with their licensing. You used to have an FCC license to be on the air for radio here in the state.
Okay.
And so, and you'd have to renew them every, I forget how many years, and You just had to pay into it, and they got rid of it completely. So you didn't have to have a license. So all of a sudden, I'm like, oh, well, I don't need this qualification now. So this is one less issue for me. And so, boom, I kind of came into that new wave.
So and I guess, yeah, and I guess that obviously will make things easier, a lot easier for people to get into doing that and doing that sort of thing. And I guess things have changed, because was it internet radio you had involvement with? Which has been a big, I mean, that's been a major game changer for people, hasn't it? To be able to do that and get more involved in that. And I've certainly seen that more readily now. I don't think it's something I should ever look into, but it is something that people have more readily been involved with. So that's, you've stuck a needle in my head thinking about that one, actually, so I'll have to try and remember it. Because
there's a Indiana University Kokomo, and they had a internet club. It was I forget what they called the club. Radio Free Kokomo is what it was. And so they were creating content and putting it on the internet so students can listen to it, wider audiences. And they were trying to get some programming set up, and they didn't have a lot. And at the time, I'd moved back here from Indianapolis, and I one of the ladies that was a producer at the school, well, she was a part of that program. She said, "Hey, didn't you used to have a show?" I said, "Yeah." She goes, "Well, why don't you bring it back, and then we can put it on here," because they don't have a lot of local programming, because they needed something from the community, because it was going to be sort of like almost like a public radio sort of thing, like, almost like public access to a certain degree. So I did a show there for like maybe 4 years, and I was doing it on weekends, and I had guests periodically. Some were local. We got a couple called in, and because it was internet radio, one of the debates that did come up at one point, I would play uncensored versions of songs, and one of the guys in the radio club was like, "Oh, well, you can't do that because you should play the radio edits instead." I said, "Well, we're not on the radio. This is the internet. The internet's like Wild West,
Yeah.
Unless you're on some site, that has rampant censorship. It's pretty much, you can say and do whatever." And so that changed. I mean, the guy was really trying to push the licensing and this and this. And I said, it's covered under the university. We can play whatever we want. I said, you know what? If you don't like the way I'm doing my program, I can put a disclaimer at the beginning. Like this, we have some mature content or immature content in some cases.
I was going to say, do you think the guy had maybe been watching Pump Up the Volume too much?
Right.
Which is one of my all-time favourite films. I absolutely love that.
Yeah.
It's a brilliant film. So, on what is, Lenny, what is your all-time, I know we're jumping subjects, but I'm going to ask, what is your all-time favourite film and why? And least favourite.
Oh, man. This is going to sound really weird.
Hey, dude, weird is good. I mean, I embrace weird. The weirder, the better.
There was a movie came out in the 80s. It was called Ishtar. Had Warren Beatty,
know it.
Dustin Hoffman, and I thought that was one of the funniest movies because you had these very great dramatic actors, and they both were being funny, and it worked.
Yeah.
Like Warren Beatty with a Southern accent, sign me up. I got to see this. Dustin Hoffman, he was like, he's got a kind of deeper voice when he talks. And, he's trying to impress some girls, and he's looking at him and goes, "Yeah, I used to be in a gang back in the day. They called me Hawk. That's my gang name, Hawk." And the girl's like, "Oh, can we call you Hawk?" He's like, "Oh, yeah, of course, doll face, whatever, baby, yeah." But I just thought it was so epically funny, and they trashed that film. The critics,
oh God, yeah,
they just drug it across the coals, and it was funny because I felt like it was in the same universe as the movie Spies Like Us with Chevy Chase and Dan Aykroyd. Like that could have been happening next Desert Over. You know what I mean? But a lot of those movies, they had these like buddy spy movies in the 80s. I always just thought those were absolutely hilarious. Always liked those. Now, my absolute least favorite film. It's weird because I liked the idea of it. I just didn't like the execution. But Ninth Gate with Johnny Depp.
Yeah, it's been a long time since I've seen it. A very long time since I've seen it. But see, here's a good indicator. I can't remember a lot about it, which either means it's really not memorable, or I've tried to wipe it. Like one of the worst films I ever saw, there was a film called The Mutant Chronicles, which I've gathered came off a computer game or something, or a board game of some sort. Mm-hmm. And it had Thomas Jane in it, and it's several years ago, and it was one of these things before they got really good. I don't know if you've ever seen it, but it's before they got really good about mixing CGI with like the real people, like the sense they did with Sin City. And all I can remember, I went to, it was the brother and the brother-in-law of a girl I was seeing at the time, and I nearly fell asleep in it. I was that bored by it, and they raved about it. They're going, "It's great, this," and I'm like, did we see the same film? But yeah, it's. I mean, I always say it's a bit like with watching something like James Bond or watching Doctor Who. Every film or every TV, but every iteration has something you can at least take from it, even if you absolutely hate it. There's something. Which brings me to, I want to talk to you about Doctor Who. Because you wrote a brilliant article about one of my all-time favourite Doctor Who's ever, which was you wrote an article about in advance of when Capaldi became the Doctor. Now, firstly, the fact when I saw that you'd written for the site you had, I was like, holy shit, that's cool. That you'd written an article on that site, I was like, that is so damn cool. So I'm going to ask you. I'm going to go very nerdy. Were you a fan of Capaldi's take as the Doctor? And what do you think of the current situation with Doctor Who and Judy Whittaker?
I think Capaldi was great. To me, he reminded me of the classic era elder statesman Doctor. You know, he was like, there were moments you could see him just kind of rolling in between the first three Doctors, persona-wise and energy-wise. That's pretty much where he was at. So he was just throwing it back. He was an old school Doctor, you know, because the game changed up, man. It's like, the funny thing was, like, when McGann came in and they did the TV movie and it didn't go anywhere. And it was crazy because I was a kid when that came out. I was in college, I think. I saw that movie and I'm like, this is an amazing show.
I loved it. I absolutely loved it. Because I had low-level memories of, I mean, I would have been very young, but I had low-level memories of the stuff with Sylvester McCoy and Sophie Aldred, their take on, which I liked. And I've even been lucky enough to meet Sophie Aldred in an interview. She's a lovely, lovely woman. Still is. She's still alive. Things happened to her. But I had the memory of their stuff being on TV, and then I remember McGann's movie coming out, and a lot of people didn't like it, but I was like, this is good. It works. And I love the sets, like the big cloister room that they had on the thing, that huge. I mean, I would have loved to have seen more of that sort of massive set stuff on the TV series. But clearly it didn't work. But McGann was very good. I think he was absolutely brilliant. And I love Capaldi's take. I'm going to be honest, I'm less taken with the stuff that's happening now. I can admit I've not. It's not done anything for me, so I'm not watching it. I'm afraid to say. Joanne, who we also have, who also co-hosts with me, loves it. So Joanne, please don't kill me for saying that. It's just not worked for me, the recent stuff.
Well, you know, I think the issue, and I almost feel like it's I want to call it the Wonder Woman effect. Where basically, do you remember when the Wonder Woman film came out and people just went gonzo?
Yes.
It was girl power. It was kaboom. And it was such a well-received film and everybody just loved it. And Wonder Woman was right there at the forefront. And it wasn't, you know, DC was always good about, let's push Superman. Let's push Batman. Those are like their de facto, but people slept on Wonder Woman. And she really came through and just blew up. And I feel like riding the crest of that energy, they were like, you know what? We had a good Wonder Woman. We could probably make a good female Doctor Who. And so I feel like it kind of rode some of that girl power energy. And I'm not knocking that at all. I think Judy Whittaker, I think she's a solid actress. I think the portrayal she's done so far, it took her a while to figure out what kind of doctor she was. Because a lot of times I felt like the way she was interacting, it's like she was mimicking some of David Tennant's.
People have said that, yeah.
Like the romantic David Tennant stuff where he's like scan something with the sonic, look at it like with the open mouth, like I just this sort of confused look. Okay, all right, let's sort this out. That's the planet neutron flow, whatever. And then next thing you know, it's problem solved. But I just didn't feel like the writing was as strong as it could be. If the writing had been, honestly, I think the Daleks overused. I know they've got some kind of arrangement or whatever, but like they're so played out, man. Daleks. I would take a villain like the Master over the monsters any day. That's just my opinion. But good grief, just the writing was just like the Moffat era. It was kind of like you'd have good, bad episode, good, and then like they would kind of trickle through, and you would have this pattern where you're like, I'll just watch them on demand. I'm not gonna sit and wait, and not gonna deal with that. Whereas when the Doctor's really got you in his grip, when the show's really compelling, you got to watch it first run. You don't want to do the re-record because everybody in your circle is going to be wanting to talk about it, or the message boards, wherever. But yeah, I just felt like Chibnall wasn't a bad writer, but sometimes like these, I think he kind of fell into that whole. He had like sort of a one-trick thing. Like I think he made some new monsters, but it's just like they're always homicidal. Just do something weird with them, It's like you remember like when Moffat did the whole thing, was that the "Are you my mommy?" and then
the gas mask.
Yes.
Yeah.
Do something kooky like that. I mean, and when I saw the whole thing with the guy with the teeth in his face, I think in her opening episode, I was like, this looks like some shit Torchwood would deal with. I mean, and it's funny because like it's in the same universe, but of course Torchwood could show up on Doctor Who, but Doctor Who would never show up on the Torchwood series.
That is strange. I mean, it's interesting when you mention the Master because I've always found the Master to be quite an interesting character. And a lot of people didn't like, just going back to our discussion on the TV movie, a lot of people didn't like Eric Roberts' take, but I liked it. I think he's probably one of the more interesting versions we've had. I think I've gathered, they've done more with him now. He's gone because one of my friends is huge. I mean, like, you want to discuss Doctor Who, my friend Sean knows just about everything you ever need to know. He does, I'm going to pimp Sean's stuff, but he does audio dramas, and he does, he will play the first Doctor, and it's spooky how good he is. Because he sent me a link once, I had no idea it was him. I'm like, God, this guy. No, honestly, I was like, God, this guy's good. I wonder who it is. And I'm like, it's him. When he told me, I was like, that's you. He is that good. He sounds like it. Freaky. But Doctor, he knows everything about him. And he was telling me how the Master, they're doing like a whole audio drama thing. And I actually met Eric Roberts, was it about 2-3 years ago? And I got to chat to him a bit, but I wish I'd asked him more about his work on Doctor Who. And I also wish I'd asked him about his work on The Dark Knight, because how the hell I forgot to ask about that is beyond me.
Yeah.
I can't believe it. I mean, I went to him and said, you were amazing, you're my favourite Master. And then, like, a lot later on, I was like, damn, yeah. Daft Point,
he really
remembering that one.
Because if you notice, the character kind of went from being almost like Terminator-ish to a more flamboyant villain. You remember by the end he had on the Gallifrey. I like to dress. And he was just, he kind of leaned into it a bit more. He got to play more with that crescendo for that character's arc, if you will, because it just kept kind of building up. First he was spitting that, I forget what it was.
The goo. It was some weird, like, ectoplasma style freezing snake, whatever it was. Yeah.
Yeah, because I guess I remember I actually caught myself listening to the novelization of it. Somebody posted on YouTube, and I think they referred to it as a morphant or something like that, some kind of creature. They explained it a little bit more, but even so, it was just such an odd move. Actually, given how the Master is, I guess it's not an odd move. He was always trying to figure out how to extend his own life.
That's true. So the one I really want to about, Lenny, is comic books.
All right.
How did it all happen? Tell me about the.
It really kind of started. You remember I was telling you, I was getting advice from Dwayne McDuffie, and so I was going on his message boards, website. Occasionally I'd ask him, "Hey, what do you think about this or that or the other?" And I still have a couple of those emails from him. I couldn't delete them. It's just like, man, that's like a piece of history,
Yeah, I know what you mean on that. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, Marvel used to have an open submission policy before Disney bought out Marvel Comics, and you could go on to the website, print up a PDF, and submission form. You could submit a script, whatever, send it off with the consent form, and boom, see what happens. And if all else failed, you get a rejection letter with like Spider-Man letterhead on it, saying like, "Don't lose heart, true believer. Try again another time." Blah blah blah. They didn't give anything.
They used to do that with Star Trek, didn't they? You could submit scripts to Star Trek. I don't think it happens now, but at one stage you could do it. And I've heard people commenting on it. The fact you could do it. It may come back to the name of a guy who did it, but there's a guy who commented on that. I think he'd submitted something to when they were making Deep Space Nine, and that's how he got into his journey of making stuff. But I'm sorry, I've butted in. Cool. Go on.
Well, so I used to just submit scripts here and there, and I'd think, okay, well, somebody's reading them because I'm getting rejection letters, and so I would, solicit advice and tweak things out. And finally, it's like, actually the first year I went to Wizard World Chicago, which I think it's going to be Fan Expo now. I think Fan Expo bought them out. But when Wizard World was connected, like Wizard Magazine, we're talking like 2004, maybe 2005. And, the Wildstorm was like a new thing at the time. And so I went to the Wildstorm panel, and, they do Q&As, and they were showing the new talent, introducing them and showing some of their artwork, and talking about, the upcoming stories and just generating hype about Wildstorm. Cause I think that's around the time DC had bought them out. And, afterwards, I talked to one of the artists, Ale Garza, who's done a lot of, he's done stuff for like the Big Two and the Big Three, technically. He's done stuff for a little bit of everybody. And then I guess there was some controversy with a Supergirl cover he did I think it was one of the ones where, the blank sketch variants. And he drew a sort of a suggestive Supergirl, and some folks had a fit about it. Well, anyway, at the time he was new to Wildstorm, and I went up to him and I said, "Hey, how you doing? I dig your work." Kind of chopped it up with him for a few minutes, and I said, "I'm trying to get in the industry." I said, "I'm not an artist. I mean, I can draw a little, but I feel like I tell a stronger, I paint a stronger picture with my writing." And so he says, "Well, self-publish." Oh,
which would be my reaction.
Yeah.
And a few people have said that when I've spoken to them who've done self-publishing. I spoke to Tim Fling. We had him on and interviewed him, and he was saying the sort of thing, same thing. He was told, well, self-publish. Now, to me, if you'd come to me, and probably even now still mentally, and I guess it's the same thing when we were talking about the radio stuff, I always think it's the bigger thing. You've got to be with a named product. or the only way you get a comic book done in my head, and probably, and as I said, it's still a little bit, is, well, Marvel do that, DC do that. So you had the reaction I would.
Yeah, I was just like, we can do that? But you know what? People have been doing it. And the independents are getting to the point now, like they'll do the, Kickstarters, they'll crowdsource. And I've even seen where, was it Dynamite? I think they've been having like those cosplay variant covers for like Vampirella and things like that. And sometimes they'll do that for some of their variants. Like they'll get like, Joseph Michael Linsner to do some specific cover, and then people they want to fund it. I'm like, really? Okay, cool. In my head canon, I'm like, you're a big company. Do you really need to do that? But I'm thinking, why not? I mean, there's other smaller presses that do the exact same thing. And obviously it's fan service. It's like, if they want that, cool, great, So self-publishing. And I thought, all right, well, I've got plenty of stories to tell. And I ran into this guy, James McCord, fellow writer. And he and I had this huge discussion about, there were a group of us that used to go to conventions. Like we'd take a bus to them, and the conversations I had with them, we had like a bunch of stuff in common as far as like characters we liked in comics and, music. We had a lot of, like Wu-Tang Clan really kind of cemented our friendship, It's like Wu-Tang and comic books. If you got those two, you got me, right? So I was telling him, like, I talked to Ollie Garza, man. He says self-publish. He was like, yeah, that's cool. He goes, but, we got to look at the cost, this, that, and the other. And it's like, but then we just decided, well, what if we just pair it up? We tell a story together. We'll get an artist to do the artwork for it. We'll get the inker, and we'll, go through that whole process and then take it to print and hopefully turn a profit. And honestly, it was less expensive working with somebody as opposed to if I'd gone it alone. I don't think I would have, or it would have taken me longer to get to that point, I believe, But yeah, it was just one of those things. I'm like, well, hey, you meet somebody and they go, so you're a writer? Yeah. What do you write? I'm like, here you go. Have a physical copy, or I can, send, like I said, the digital copies. Mm-hmm. So people are aware of what you can do and what you're capable of. That's, what better way to show off that you can do it than by going, oh, here's a finished product. Here's what I've done. And then if maybe the right person sees it, they might have me in mind for something in, some project, or they might want to see what else I've got up my sleeve.
It's interesting that, speaking to you, it's you, Tim, and Dre have all done the same sort of thing on a comic book production.
Yeah.
I spoke to them about you have embraced brilliantly self-publishing and getting something out there, which I know I sound like I'm repeating it, but in the past that would have been unheard of.
Yeah.
Completely unheard of. And it's just a phenomenal thing. To me, it's a brilliant thing that people are going to be able to do that. So you were told do the self-publishing, and the characters and the work you've done. What made you choose them? What was the ding light bulb moment, as they say?
Public domain characters. So a lot of them have been around 70 plus years, 80 years. Some have been around centuries, and so it's easier to take a character that's widely known. So you don't have to sit there and go, oh, I got to figure out origins for this guy. And so is the first issue going to be the origin issue? Or do you tell that later on? And then it's like everybody knows who Dracula is, you look, there's Dracula toys. They've got movies. I think they've done cartoons, everything. He's just part of the culture, The vampire is such a great metaphor for so many things, like sex addiction or greed or lust or, all these dark nooks and crannies you can kind of pursue with those sort of characters. But, public domain, there's these wealth of characters just collecting dust. And once upon a time, they were popular, It's like when I was doing my research into, Doctor Who and kind of wondering where the whole concept of it came from. And I'd seen that there was a Dr. Omega, Arnold Galopin, this French sci-fi writer, made like the early 1900s. He'd been writing characters with this, little old man who's not human, looks like it, but he's not. Traveling around companions, a little quirky ship, and I'm like, that's back to formula. That's the source. And I'm like, hey, Dr. Omega's public domain. I could totally write stories with him. So I put my own spin on it. I feel like it kind of cycling back to Judy Whittaker. For every person that was like, whooping and hollering, having a, ready to have a big old party when they had a female version of the Doctor. I decided I wanted to take the whole Doctor Who concept back to formula. So Dr. Omega, and I made him a person of color. And I tied him into other mythologies as well. And it's just like, there's so many concepts that people have just left. They're just sitting there, and it's like, you refresh them, bring them back around, and you expose it to a whole new audience. Like if you read The Six Emperors, it's like, you got Dracula, Mr. Hyde, Captain Nemo, Bride of Frankenstein, Helen of Troy, Professor Moriarty. Like, they're all pretty iconic villains in their own right. And so to have them together, it's like, maybe you didn't know a whole lot about Nemo. So suddenly you're compelled to go check out the source material. Everybody has like one character that normally will jump out at them they really prefer. Playing around with the whole Jekyll and Hyde thing, I'm like, that's like Banner and Hulk, basically,
Absolutely.
And I've seen, I've sent it to a couple of the publishers before, and one of the comparisons I did get was to the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen.
I was going to ask you if there was any kind of influence on that as we were leading into it.
I hadn't even read it, the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen at the time. And so it was still kind of cool to go, hey, Alan Moore does public domain stuff. Dynamite Comics does it. Why can't I? It's like not a completely foreign concept. Like, somebody might have heard of some of these characters. So that's where we got the impetus to put them together as a team. And they're not really, whereas the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen were, they were bad guys kind of forced into doing good. So it was like Suicide Squad-ish, So they were ahead of the curve, really. But it's more along the lines of, as far as, God, I'm getting sidetracked, aren't I?
It's all right. We'll get there. Whatever route you have to take, we'll
Alan,
get there.
So I was just going to say, the whole thing with like Alan Moore, great writer, iconic. And then the whole thing with like him versus Grant Morrison. I think Grant Morrison's great in his own right too. They both are just solid guys as far as their writing and stuff goes. And I do like the I think one of the wildest lectures I'd ever seen was Grant Morrison at DisinfoCon. Like, it's on YouTube if you ever get a chance to check it out. It's him talking about doing magic and getting results and sigils and things like that. Like 45 minutes of Grant Morrison. But I don't know. Like, I've come to notice, ours is definitely not the same in so much as their cabal. They pretty much won. They're just maintaining their turf. They're the Six are basically kind of like a secret society, more or less. It was funny. Originally, we were going to give it a different name. We were going to call them Illuminati. And the artist that was working for us was like, man, I wouldn't do that. I think that'll throw off the appeal and this. And I'm like, okay. Sterling had been in the game a lot longer than James and myself. And we thought, yeah, we'll come up with another one. And Six Emperors is what came to mind. And then I've written further stories with the characters, and we've actually both got a couple of stories in the works. We want to put together like a single volume at some point. That's the agenda, anyway.
Cool. And what would you say has been the most challenging and most rewarding?
Challenging is when you're going to shows and you've got people. I'm sure you've probably dealt with this going to conventions, depending on whether what side of the table you're on. You can be a creator, and sometimes people walk by and they act like they don't see it. They'll do this sort of, oh, let me turn my head while we walk past this guy's table So I have to see him and him smiling or waving or saying hi, or I'm like, hey, how's it going? How are you? And I'm like, they'll kind of awkward, like, I don't want your merch, sorry. It's not a big deal. It's not for everybody, and you have to realize that no matter what you put out, there's some folks aren't going to get it. I had somebody, I was at a signing, and this lady was like, this sounds like an occult book. I said I wouldn't necessarily call it an occult book. I mean, it's got some horror elements, a little bit of supernatural stuff. So, oh, it sounds, like satanic. I'm like, it's not satanic. None of us, we didn't have that intent going into it. We didn't curse the books. The red ink isn't made with our blood or anything, It's just weird, man, because here's the thing. Like I was saying.
It's not like the Kiss comic book where allegedly they gave the blood, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and I think they actually did that with Mark Grunwald's Ashes. I think they put it in an issue of Captain America.
Wow.
I think that's how the story went. But anyway, Alan Moore goes out in some left field places. I've always liked his stuff, but he can be a little rapey. We're not rapey in our book, And I mean, I'm not. It's really strange how, like, I just thought, like, a lot of the concepts that he. Well, have you seen, like, okay, so Watchmen, DC liked the story, they wanted him to change the characters. So he made these other versions of these characters, but now Grant Morrison, I think, came out with a book that had the characters that were originally intended. So it's like he's doing another version of Watchmen with the proper characters. And I can't remember what it's called. I think it was might have been a Pax Americana or something like that, or shoot. I just seen an article about it recently and it kind of threw me. I was like, that's weird. It's like kind of going back to formula,
That is interesting. Excuse me. So I've always wanted to know, I always like to ask people, certainly been involved with comic books, if you could have created any comic book, or any, in fact, no. Well, I'll do it how I always ask people. We're not going to tie you down to just comics. I always say to people, if you could have created anything, or you could make anything, what would it be? What would you create? And I'm gonna name drop and go back to Eric Roberts again, because when I asked him, and please, if he listens, don't sue me. You haven't made it yet, so you can't. I'm not stealing anything. I said to him, if you could create anything, you could make any show, what would it be, or any film? And he came up with this amazing, to me, I think it should work really well. He's the first gentleman, so his wife's the president, and he is also an art thief and a master criminal, and he's doing all the weird criminality.
Yeah. With
the protection of being the first gentleman while she's the president. And I think that'll be, if he makes it, that'll be absolutely amazing.
Yeah, it sounds pretty out there, and I think it could work.
Come on, Eric, do it. Pull the trigger, do it.
Man, if I could create anything, man. I think I would have, man, there's so much. My mind is like going.
I've been a swine by throwing this one at you, haven't I? I apologize.
Right. But I've actually kind of had this hankering to do something with Dr. Mabuse. You remember that character from the German film? There was like I think it was like Mabuse the gambler. They had another. It was like the Last Will and Testament of Dr. Mabuse.
Mm-hmm. It was, I do know it. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, they've done songs about him. He could supposedly possess people, mesmerize them. He's this master criminal. I feel like over the years I've seen some cool films using that character, and I'd love to take a crack at that, like Dr. Mabuse. Like, I mean, if you really think about it, like it's like an evil Professor Xavier,
Yeah.
Like this guy who's like completely unchecked. Like, who's gonna check him? I've got a story that I started with Dr. Mabuse, and I've not finished it, but that would be the move. Like, because how do you defeat a guy like that?
Yeah, and it's like the Superman question, isn't it? In reality, I'm pretty sure that if Superman was about, he would become this. I don't think he'd be this one. Look, the Kents are lovely and all, but I'm not quite sure if it'd work in real life. I think after a while he'd be like, "What, you want me to be this mild-mannered person when I can just control the entire world?" I fear if it was real life, it would be like that. I think he'd be unchecked, completely unchecked and unstoppable. Which is kind of what I liked when you, I'm sidetracking, but when you watch Batman vs. Superman, I like the fact you actually saw people having a negative reaction to Superman. Because I don't think everyone would be all like, oh, it's wonderful, it's great. People would, because it's the thing of, he's an unknown, all-powerful, like God. You would fear him.
Right.
You're not necessarily going to be like, oh, he's great. It would be like, whoa, what do we do with this?
Oh, man. I liked when Kevin Grevius did the Legend of the Blue Marvel. Did you ever read that series?
I've heard of it, but no, I've not read it.
It was he basically kind of retconned in this character, the Blue Marvel, who was this mass crime fighter, a Superman of sorts, but he was covered completely from head to toe. In actuality, he was a black man. He was a scientist. And, of course, science happens, an accident, and boom, next thing you know, he's accessing, because I think he could actually end up manipulating antimatter. So there was an Blue Marvel, and an Anti-Man was like his arch enemy, and Anti-Man had shown up in the modern era, and the Blue Marvel had basically, he'd been around. He was sort of like I said, a Superman type, and it got to a certain point when he had this huge battle, his costume got torn up, and you could see he was a person of color.
Mm-hmm. And
the president basically kind of, put him in protective custody. It was like, so the world's not ready for this. He said they don't, way civil rights are. It's like a superpowered black dude is just going to freak people out. And so that character had to live this undercover life up until he was needed again when Anti-Man shows back up. Because the Avengers couldn't handle it. They were like, this is a bit much. We need somebody. We got to access some lost files, figure out what's going on. And I think that's right around the time Tony Stark was head of S.H.I.E.L.D., so he finds him. And then they bring him into the modern era properly. And it was a great story, But it was one of those things, you had somebody who's like ridiculously powerful. And then for a country that's divided by racism, a superpowered person of color, that would scare some people.
I'm going to have to look for that. That sounds really cool.
Yeah.
I'm going to have to find that because that really does grab my attention as a good read. So we've gone on, we've strayed into the superhero thing. And anyone who listens will know my love of DC. I'm constantly mocked by my fellow co-hosts and, to be honest, some of the salty tadpoles for my love of mentioning DC and bring DC into things. So I'm not going to say DC, but I might be winking at the camera, so to speak. What superhero films are you looking forward to?
Black Adam with The Rock. I mean, he's, he got himself and whipped himself into even greater shape for the role. The costume, like the little teaser trailers, look pretty elaborate. I'm looking forward to it. That's the big DC thing for me right now. I'm cautiously optimistic about the Batman.
Similar, but I'm not sure. We're very similar. I keep saying it'll probably be okay. I want to be proven wrong, but I'm really not sure.
The thing that kind of threw me off, the Riddler. He looks very BDSM. Like he looks like the Diddler instead of the Riddler. You know what I mean? It's just that costume's horrible, man. Big green overcoat and a green leather mask. I'm like, come on.
I mean, I think what they're trying to do is make him more like the Zodiac Killer.
Yeah.
But, which I guess adds an element of, you can see why, Zodiac did strange riddles and questions and things. So I can see why. But yeah, I mean, the interesting thing is they're releasing a lot of little bits from the Batman at the moment. And that makes me wonder, are they worried? Because they're giving away a little, there's lots of stuff going on YouTube, things like that. Are they worried?
Yeah.
And I also keep thinking, we kind of seen it before. this take. There's a bit. It's like they're almost trying to do a bit of Nolan or outdo Nolan, and I'm thinking we've seen this before. For me, I am looking forward to Black Adam. The one I'm really looking forward to is The Flash. And I'm praying that isn't going to let me down, because I really like Ben Affleck as Batman. I know a lot of people didn't, but I really dug him. But the fact it's him, Keaton, my Batman from my childhood. They're going to be together. It's just, please don't suck.
Yeah, I mean, and I really feel like when Spider-Man No Way Home came out, that cemented the multiverse concept so much more. Even though, like, in the CW series, Flash and the Arrowverse and all that, they had done their Crisis on Infinite Earth. So it's like, and even when they showed the cinematic, the Ezra Miller Flash there, and he met Barry Allen, and it was just like the TV versions of Grant Gustin, and that was a great moment too. And it's like, I'm glad to see that the companies are kind of being more tongue-in-cheek about it, because if you really look at any project they do, you almost have to treat everything like an Elseworld if it's a DC-related project, because they never get everything on point. They would do their little variations here and there. It's like Marvel's kind of taken to like the whole Shang-Chi movie. I remember his father was Fu Manchu. He was a crime lord. There were no 10 rings. He didn't have the Mandarin was a different character. The Mandarin actually wore 10 finger rings, and each one had a different power. And it's like, they tweak stuff, or like when they do Taskmaster and Black Widow, it's just, come on. It's like,
I couldn't work that out either. The way they did Taskmaster. Yeah, it didn't make sense to me.
I mean, he even has like a regular name. For the longest, his name was unrevealed. They finally said his name was Tony Masters. I'm like, see, that's like, changed the gender, we changed the character design, we changed his abilities. We don't care. I mean, just give it. Come on, just keep paying, keep coming to theaters, keep coming.
Well, I think if the one thing I would love to have seen, it's not going to happen, but the one thing I would like to see in The Flash, and again, unpopular opinion, but I like Brandon Routh as Superman. A lot of people, I get so much crap off people for liking Superman Returns, but I will admit this here and now, Lenny. I cried my eyes out in the cinema to that.
Yeah.
I never expected it, but emotionally, when I started seeing it was the copying the original setup from the Reeve stuff, I wept. And I actually met Brandon Routh and could admit that to him. I said, I saw your film. I was crying. You broke me, sort of thing.
Oh, wow.
And
how did he react to that?
You might have thought, who the hell is this crazy Englishman in front of me? But he was very nice to me, and just, I'm glad you enjoyed it, had a reaction, because to me, just a side note, for seeing Superman, it was always a deal I made with my father, because he's a huge fan of Superman when he was a child. And I said, if they ever make a new film, I will take you to see it. And that was a big thing for me and him, seeing Superman Returns.
Yeah.
And we both enjoyed it. And when I met Brandon Routh, I also got him to do an autograph of a picture to my dad. So that was a nice little gift for my dad as well. But yeah, I really liked it. And when I saw him on the Crisis on Infinite Earth, I was like, I loved it. I thought it was really good. And I'd love to see him either given a series, or to me it'd be cool if he was in the Flash film, because of course he's meant to be the Superman who will be the counterpart to Keaton's Batman. But
yeah,
I'm not working for Warner Brothers, so
Right. I mean, Ralph was a good Superman, and he was a great Kingdom Come Superman. It was just like, to see him in that outfit, you're like, man, it's like Alex Ross and Mark Waid must have had like proud papa moments, you know what I mean? Like, to see that on screen, it was just like, oh my God, really? Because he did sort of a reveal at one of the cons a few years ago. He had on like a button-up shirt, and he pulls it open, and he had the Kingdom Come Superman logo, and everybody was just like, that collective gasp, because they thought, it's going to be a Kingdom Come movie. Now, the crazy thing is, the producers of the Black Adam film are saying, hey, they ought to do Kingdom Come as a film. We ought to adapt that. That's been like the big talk that I've seen the past couple days, and I thought, That'd be pretty interesting. But honestly, as great as the special effects and everything are, it'd be great to see Kingdom Come as an animated feature and get some big name voices. I think that would be epic. And do a theatrical release, you know? It's like when Into the Spider-Verse came out, great film. It was fun.
It was. Yeah. God, yeah.
And I feel like the comic companies are always trying to keep up with each other as far as, oh, they're going to come out with TV series, we're going to come out with TV series. They're going to go this movie, we're going to come out with this movie. This, that, and the other. They go back and forth. But goodness, man, just lean into it. It's like, don't forget that before we were seeing actors playing these parts, we were watching them in the smaller screen as cartoons, you know, if we weren't reading the comic books. So why not just go back to formula, just get like some kind of really great animation style done, you know, in the style of that and just adapt it. I would love to see that.
Yeah, I mean, the one I would love to see, I always wanted it made as a film, but it didn't happen. But I think Superman Lives could have been something amazing with Nick Cage, the Tim Burton take on Superman. And I think if they could do that as a cartoon, it would be absolutely mind-blowing. And I'd love the death of, you know, what happened, the death of Superman Lives, what happened. Yeah, that's right. I thought that was an amazing documentary.
Yeah.
So I have you've spoken to me for more than long enough, and I don't want to take up any more of your time. I will just say to Gemma, who will be listening to this and possibly do some editing, hey, look, Gemma, I got DC in yet again. So, the force is strong with me.
Man, it's like one of the places I work at, there was I was doing a video conference and I had a Black Adam statue on my desk. And this guy starts talking about the movie and I hold the statue up and he's like, where'd you get that? You know, I mean, you know, I got to feel I'm going to be, and I'm glad with meeting and seeing older people that are still into this stuff because it validates me I feel like as a fan, I'm like, okay, I can have a head full of gray hair and still like, you know, still like watching the DC movies or the Marvel movies or whatever. It's okay. You know?
It is. So I'm going to ask you, Lenny, what future products have you got in the offing? Project? I'll say again. Lenny, what future projects do you have in the offing? I can pronounce words, I promise you. What future projects are in the offing? And is there anything you want to pimp, as they say?
Well, I want to definitely pimp Amos-Cola.com. That's formerly Amos Magazine, Amos Cola. A lot of my writings are there, my poetry, my prose. I've been writing some short fiction using public domain characters. So I've got like the Dr. Omega stories on that site. I've got some of the other stories featuring the members of the Six Emperors on the page. The Scarlet Ace is another one I've been writing for a couple of years now. And basically, he's a vigilante that's sort of starting a bit of a movement. So, those are definitely like AMLS-COLA.com. Amos Cola. That is who I want to definitely pimp out and promote. Also, there's a website. It's a Facebook page called Not Necessarily Kokomo News. Those guys are doing some hilarious stuff on there. A lot of memes. And it's not just, I mean, they're local, obviously, but still, you can be from a different region and check this out and find something funny to laugh about. And then, let's see, Waste of Kokomo, the podcast. You can find that on a bunch of different platforms. And that's the show that I do with Brian Blunt, Jimmy Shaw, Courtney Richardson, and we try to have guests weekly. The last person we interviewed was there's a local guy who dresses as Batman and jogs around town, and we had him on as a return guest. So that was fun just to chat with him. So those are the big things I'm in right now. And then you can find some of the videos, and I've been doing some short form stuff on YouTube. So if you just look up Leonard Pigg on YouTube, you'll find some of my stand-up. You'll find some of the video shorts I've done, and I'm just randomly creating content here and there. I'm not in it for the money, just trying to keep myself out of trouble.
Well, that's great. You are doing a brilliant job in what you're producing, and I enjoy it. I'm really sure that the Salty Tadpoles, now that you give them the best links to get hold of it, will enjoy it as much as or more than I do. I'm not sure more than would be possible, because I really dig your stuff. So, without, I think we've been talking of Codswallop on this episode. Without further ado, I'll just say, Lenny, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me. I wish you a wonderful day and the rest of the weekend ahead. And once again, thank you very much.
Cheers. Thanks for having me.